And sometimes it's amazing how it happens, because when you tell the story, pointing out how she's at fault, some way, somehow, you end up being at fault
and apologizing.
And having to apologize and now retract what you said.
When a man is being abused by the woman, I didn't even laugh. Who's laughing? I didn't even laugh.
Was it hilarious to you?
Have you heard of cases or
especially if you marry a girl?
I have.
You say what?
Especially if you marry a girl.
Because there are women who beat their husbands very well, who physically abuse their husbands. It does happen, so we shouldn't say that it doesn't happen. I'm sure there are men who are silent about it because of what you said. Because your woman is abusing you.
You've gone into
all those your battles, So when you entered the home that day, I think they weren't expecting that you'd be there. So the woman had hooked the man, at the throat so strongly. A lot of them, you go back and you realize that there are issues way that have now formed, that kind of new person they've become, and who get that kind of attention or love in that way because they've been victims of abuse. There are people who get their sexual gratification from the fact that their partner, beats them, and even sometimes during the sex or love making, it's like you are put in chains and you are helpless, and the whole activity is very, very rigorous, like with no mercy. A lot of them, you go back and you realize that there are issues way that have now formed, that kind of new person they've become, and who get that kind of attention or love in that way because they've been victims of abuse. Way that have now formed, that kind of new person they've become, and who get that kind of attention or love in that way because they've been victims of abuse.
I wanted to find out. So it's a thing in our society. Typically in African society, we find it hilarious. But I think elsewhere in the world, it may also have the same hilarious situation around it. Is that people in relationships, when a man is being abused by the woman, I didn't even laugh. Who's laughing? I didn't even laugh.
Was it hilarious to you? But it's a serious
thing, you see, but like men are being abused.
It's a very serious issue. And abuse is not only men abusing.
I know. Did you get cases? Have you heard of cases or
especially if you marry a girl?
I have.
You say what?
Especially if you marry a girl.
This is an indictment or somebody's called.
I'm not being tribalistic or anything, but if you look at the statistics.
What statistics?
Oh, the statistics.
From?
I probably didn't know that you're going to ask this question, but I mean, in my exposure, in my room of exposure, it's. I mean, the girls have been.
Did you have any experience with that?
Close experience.
Experience is the best teacher, so please allow you. Okay, let me come in on this.
Okay.
Abuse itself is a big definition that doesn't only transcends just physical abuse to emotional abuse. There's sexual abuse. There's neglect.
Yeah.
And in relationships, you can have any of these forms of abuse occurring. And when you asked the question, my mind just went to it that actually, probably men are not facing a lot of physical abuse in marriages, but they could be facing a lot of emotional, psychological abuse.
And sexual abuse.
Yes, but that definition of sexual abuse will not actually fit the men. It will be more of emotional abuse and neglect, especially where your partner, the female, is denying you of sexual intimacy, especially in a marital context when you know you are due. So women sometimes use that as a weapon to get their way, and that is abuse. Abusing the man emotionally, psychologically. Some women who do not care for their husbands anymore and think that, yeah, I mean, for whatever reason, whatever the issue is, may also be neglecting the man. Those are types of abuse that are very subtle and unspoken. So I feel that more men go through a lot more psychological abuse and neglect. Now, this is different from intimate partner violence. The word violence connotes physical abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's because more of the time we rather hear of intimate partner violence coming from the man's angle, where the man abuses the woman physically, beating and all that. Yes, of course, statistically that is more common, but it doesn't mean that the opposite, that the reverse doesn't occur. Because there are women who beat their husbands very well, who physically abuse their husbands, and I've had to handle one issue like that. Though a lot of tons of others that I've, of course, handled is the other. It's the common one. The male, yes, abusing the woman physically. But I've had one that the female was physically abusing the man. And the interesting aspect was that, I mean, of course, there were all the other forms of abuse was present. And after the man, spoke about all the issues, I realized that, and he himself had gone to read about, I realized the woman had a personality disorder. She was a kind of a narcissistic kind of person, personality. And he already had clues of it before the marriage. But you know how when people are in a relationship and we overlook certain things thinking that, they are in love, but when the reality hits on them, it was so bad. It's one of the men I've really, really felt so sorry for. The marriage actually ended in divorce. So at the time that I was seeing him, they had been divorced. But it does happen. So we shouldn't say that it doesn't happen. I'm sure there are men who are silent about it because of what you said. Because your woman is abusing you. You've got to all those your battles. So it can kind of sound awkward, shameful to the man to voice it out.
Yeah.
Recently, I was somewhere and we were sharing ideas, and somebody gave the point of they as Sunday school teachers going into their children's homes to visit the children. And when she entered the home that day, it was even he was a Sunday school teacher. When he entered the home that day, I think they weren't expecting that he would be there. So the woman had hooked the man, at the throat so strongly. In whatever demand that she was trying to demand, and the thing is that the man is definitely probably not going to say to anybody until the teacher, because he actually thought that this was the perfect home. Then he knows them very well, the perfect home, But we come out and we're all smiling to create an outward vibe that everything is fine, but inside the house, so apparently the woman has rather been beating the man in the house. It's not easy. So I feel that probably even the reporting has biased it. So probably there are a lot more men facing.
I'm serious. Most men are suffering. Men are suffering in silence and in pain. And at this point, what you sincerely pray for is that the God who hears our silent cries and our silent tears attends to these issues.
When people are pushed to the wall, you may act without before you realize how so angry whichever parties were. You may really even have a very good motive, but the other person can really push you to the wall, where now probably your retaliation may also end up with a banter to banter. But I think that as much as possible, we can prevent it. So once you see signs that this person is like to get physically aggressive towards you, definitely if you stand there for a fight, then you have to fight, because like you have to both defend yourself too. So I think that we should even prevent that physical, injury or assault to one another. If you have to leave the scene for a while, allow it, leave the scene. If you have to do de-escalation, in our practice we do de-escalation for violent people and aggressive people. Sometimes a softer tone, you don't know how powerful words are, but the tone of your voice and how reassuring it is can actually de-escalate a person's whole up on the roof anger to calm down a bit to a point where later on you can now engage them more constructively to whatever they really were so upset about that they were coming to you about. And definitely you need to know your partner, because if your partner is having tendencies for physical abuse and punching and hitting and kicking, then if you know you can't stand, please don't go there. Don't go near. If you already become a victim of it, then it's really good that the two of you seek out help. Don't be silent and staying under that one roof about it, because it's going to end in something else.
All right. I want to talk about the last thing, but before I do, I want to ask you, based on the example you just gave, when you have, I'm just shifting from the men to the women. I've heard instances where a woman is beaten and she says that I will not report it because he loves me. That's why he beats me. And that it is a form of, like, especially when they are beaten, it's because they were too stubborn, they talked too much, and then he put him in his place. He wanted to see the man be masculine and all of that. So that's one. And number two is either they wanted to, after being beaten, the man will now become more remorseful, and then would want to plead. Now seeing the man on his knees pleading for what he had done, bringing flowers, making reparations towards whatever happened, is seen more as a romantic side. Such people, given whatever reasons, please, in your practice, is it a psychological issue?
So it's a very important point you've raised. I'm happy you brought it up before we call it all an end. So we have sadist and masochist. I don't know whether you've heard of those terms. These are
for the purposes of our listeners and viewers.
So I'm going to explain those terms, but then on the point, these are very, very important engraved psychological issues right there, playing from your subconscious, rise up. Because if you need to experience that kind of abuse before later on you feel that, then it's very likely that your upbringing and childhood, you've had adverse experiences that have gotten you to think in that way. And you probably have been a victim already of that kind of abuse. Like I said, abuse is not only physical, it could be emotional abuse. Nobody really cared for you or loved you, neglected you, and you only get the kind of affection you want after somebody has physically abused you or whatever, before they now come remorseful at you. And that makes you feel loved, because all the other times you don't feel any love in any form. So that is a whole psychological issue. Such a person needs to, a lot of the time, see the clinical psychologist to do what we call analysis. That means that we are going back to look at things that you have gone through in life that has brought you to that point, that is making you only making you wanting to experience that kind of uncomfortable situation just for the reward of getting the love afterward. Yes. So, and a lot of the times when those people need help. That's my summary. So people, now back to the sadist and masochist, there are people who get their sexual gratification from the fact that their partner beats them and beats them and beats them, and even sometimes during the sex or love making, it's like you are put in chains and you are helpless, and the whole activity is very, very rigorous, like with no mercy.
I think there's a movie
because
Shades of Grey.
Yes.
So a lot of them,
50 Shades.
Yes, that's one, and then both of them. A lot of them, you go back and you realize that there are issues way that have now formed, that kind of new person they've become, and who get that kind of attention or love in that way because they've been victims of abuse. So it's not proper. It's not proper that your husband or your partner only shows you love after they hurt you, and then they come begging, and then in their begging and probably trying to compensate you, that's when you feel out. It means there's a problem in the relationship. So though the person feels satisfied then that, oh, she's getting love after those things, it's only a coping mechanism. It's only a coping, because she doesn't get the love that should be there. So this is the time she gets the love. So then that's more abuse, okay? So that I'll probably get a sorry, or I'll probably get my husband on his knees with a flower. But if your husband was already such that he doesn't have to abuse you before, but he would already show you that love, you wouldn't wait to want to be abused before. So that couple need a whole counseling session, psychotherapy sessions. I think they need help. The person too needs help.
So the last thing I wanted to talk about is vulnerability on the part of men. We've seen, because of the men health crisis going viral on TikTok and on social media generally, women have advocated that men should be open.
Yeah.
They should talk more. They should tell them what's going on with them and all of that. However, that's just what they should. Now, this thing, I'm asking you as a professional and as a woman. The issue with guys is this. I open up to you, tell you what is wrong. Now, you take it personal.
How?
And then accuse in the end. If, for instance, a guy is probably distressed about something that the lady is doing at home, that he's kept quiet of it. But you're like, you need to really talk about it and all that. And then he tells the lady, not accuse him, but saying, oh, these things that you do, or these things that I've observed. In the end, you end up holding guys into the room.
Okay.
For actually opening up. Because the tables will turn.
I experienced this yesterday. And it makes you want to question whether to open up on certain things.
Or not.
Because now it's like what you say will be used against you in
Sincerely.
your marital court or relationship court.
Sincerely.
And
Sincerely.
it's and sometimes it's amazing how it happens, because when you tell the story pointing out how she's at fault, some way somehow you end up being at fault
And apologizing.
and having to apologize and now retract what you said.
Of course. I think
Very
how do you handle
important
that
issue. Very
Yes.
important, very practical issue. You know how we all have ego, though it said that men are more egoistic, but we all have the place where we are afraid of being criticized or having bad aspects, pointed out to us. But it's very important that in life you go through constructive criticism and amend when it's necessary. So I'm saying this because it's specifically that issue that is stressing the man has to do with his partner, and then definitely the partner having to take in the fact that these are things that you are doing that distress me. So it's more like the partner sees it as a criticism, and they are not easily able to embrace that criticism very well or manage it well. So then that is why I'm sure it's going to become like an argument. And you cry, you did this, that's why. Then it's like blame shifting will continue.
Yeah.
Then you get to the point where somebody has to mellow to the ground and give up, and probably the man is the likely one, because they don't want to go on and on.
You see, it's stressful. It's stressful having to deal with it. This is what I know. Men think logically. So we make our cases logically. We string them logically so that it makes sense to us. You did this, and it amounted to this, did that, and then this is the result. So you have strung the whole thing logically. Women are more emotionally
thinking.
and emotionally intelligent than men.
Yeah.
Now, the whole thing you are saying, she's just stringing a whole lot of emotions and
about
seeing
it.
where the whole thing is going.
Exactly.
And then she'll explain it from an emotional point of view.
Yes.
That it is your fault for making me feel this.
That's why she also acted like this.
And the funny thing is, sometimes the discussion can end and
be
a day later
be picked up again. It's not ending.
I can't remember I had a discussion with a friend, and so this issue was with about something that she had done, and I was quiet on it for a while. So when she had and then she understood that apologized. The next time I hear from her, I've not heard from you. But, like we were talking about something, and like, oh, and so why didn't you say, oh no, because the last time we spoke,
You said
she referred.
yes.
And here's the thing: the referral was not based on the issue.
Okay.
Something
My
from
issue,
it.
I mean, it was based on the problem,
Okay.
not the solution. Because at the end of the conversation, we had a solution.
Okay.
We understood each other.
Okay.
We're okay. But this is not the first time I've seen such a thing before. We've had this kind of thing where they just forget that we had a consensus. Like we came to a mutual agreement, we had a relief. But the next time they are not referring to the relief.
To the relief, but to the
To the
problem.
issue.
problem.
Yeah. So
Dealing with such things
I
as
would
men.
I would say that I mean this is where dynamics of being a woman and being those differences come in.
Yes.
From the point where women see things, the point where men see things. So it's really a lot about learning about each other and how to communicate more effectively, because so it's not going to be one-armed. It's not going to be the man having to try to understand the woman. It's not going to be the woman having to try to understand the man. The two of us have to really, really try to learn, about each other so well, and how both of us are different. Our differences are part of the game, so that at the end of the day, you from your logical and aspect and bringing statistics and laying it before the woman, that's why I don't like it. She from the emotional point that you two, that thing that you didn't say it well, that's why I started doing this. At the end of the day, both of you have to somehow understand each other and try to it's work and it's effort put at it. Yes, so that because initially the two of you will still keep having this banter, but with time, in growing together, you would get to understand that, I forgot that the last time I met you and you said all that. It's not like you were really attacking me, but it was actually you were bringing out what was distressing you, and I also hadn't understood you because I was very upset about how you behaved towards me. I didn't feel that, so that's why. So we come to the point where we both mature. So if one party matures and leaves the other behind, you're always going to have somebody pulling you, apart, because you're always going to, one person is going to, if it's the woman, it's going to always make you feel, though your point was really valid, you really needed that help for her to understand and amend her ways, but because she's not growing up with you, she keeps seeing it as an attack on her person, and so you always have to apologize. And I don't know whether after the apology, the whole issue that you brought is going to be solved. That is, whatever you wanted her to try to change will be amended or not. I think the solution in terms of what the man needs the woman to do, it should come clear. Yes, a lot of the times when men and women communicate, these two differences bring issues. By the end, you would have fought more than you would have resolved. But what the point I'm making now is that we should grow. We should grow to understand each other and grow together, so that now I know how I interpret what you say, and you also know how to interpret what I say and how I react to whatever it is. And that is not supposed to push men away from talking to their women. We need to, and it's very important. Whereby if you think your partner is still not matured and able to really understand you, you definitely need a third person. You need an experienced person. It could be, like you said earlier, your pastor, it could be a counselor, it could be a professional. Somebody definitely has to be. And I just remembered last Friday, the one before, I had to spend a whole 3 hours with a couple on issues like this. And these days it gets interesting, and I kind of through the work kind of really learned a lot of experience in it, especially about how we communicate as men and women, how we misunderstand each other, and then it ends into a whole banter to banter, which was not supposed to be necessary. So when the other person who is a professional or an experienced person, third person comes in, it helps the two of you to see things at a level ground, and try to resolve things. So if men are finding issues trying to just talk to their partners, and it shouldn't only be talking about maybe what the partner is doing that upsets them. Sometimes for men, you have things that a lot of the time I realize it's not even about their partner, but a lot of struggles they are having. about work, about their own lives, about running the home, whatever. But then because they feel that we are men, we shouldn't talk it out. So they become all silent and reserved, and the woman expresses it as a sign of not loving her or not being warm towards her. So they misinterpret your struggle. That's where we say the woman should try and talk, talk about it. Because the women, they will interpret things in so many ways. We will have a lot of interpretations for your unspoken words. And that is where more problems begin to happen. Many assumptions for your unspoken words. So it's better to speak it to clear the air. But if you think the woman is not able to handle it well and keeps at it, and that's going to be more distress for you, you bring in someone.
I think this is one of the very powerful points I've heard you give today about the point of growth. That in relationships we seek to grow with each other and not necessarily adapt. Because if you adapt, then you're adapting. You may actually be adapting to bad behavior, and you may suffer the consequences for it. But if the idea of the relationship is to grow and to grow yourselves, to grow together, and to be more united with the idea of maturity, then very likely you are going to have a very good relationship, something that you clearly are able to understand yourselves and necessarily be vulnerable to each other, where you will not be criticized generally for being vulnerable to the other person. This has been a wonderful session. This episode explores, we start with Dr. Ruchalo, and then we spoke basically about the different forms of abuse and why it's important not to tolerate that. And as much as it happens to ladies more often than not, the statistics also do show that it also happens to men. And so I hope you sincerely enjoy the podcast, and let me know in your comment section. You can reach out to us via the email and also on Facebook. Just let us know how this impacted you, and if you have any concerns, you can raise them there as well. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless you. And as always, I encourage you, if you haven't subscribed, please do, because we began this not too long ago and we are growing steadily. We want to become a big, huge family, and we would like you to be a part of it. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next episode.